The 41-year-older old millionaire was completely stunned to see the 18-year-old waitress who looked exactly like his ex-W. The restaurant buzzed soft conversation. The sound of clinking glasses blending seamlessly with the delicate notes of a piano drifting teachy air. I crystal chandeliers bathed the room in a waggle glow. Illuminating the tables draped in pristine white linen. Alexander Carter sat at the corner table, his back to the fluoro-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Ormwed beyond the glass, faint flashes of lightning ring against the dark sky. Turmoil outside was nothing compared to the storm inside him. He stirred his bourbon mindlessly, sly, barely listening as his business partner drove about market strategic expansion plans. Then the words blurred together meaninglessly. His mind was somewhere else, or perhaps now nowhere at all. Teatl. It had been that way for years. Ye, sir. So take your order? Deku your order? Word the van clear oft and clear, cutting through like blind. Line. Alexander blinked and looked up. His hanin midair, the glass slipped from his fingers. 5 fingers catching the edge of the table before toppling, bourbon splashing onto white cloth. The world around him seemed to tilt for a moment. He couldn't breathe. Ding behind him, holding some small notepads, a young waitress looked exactly like Elena. Constrahart constricted, hammering in his ears, the same brown wavy hair cascading over his shoulders, same delicate feature, she gentle curve of high s. The slightly upturned tea, it was the eyes that stole the breath from his lungs, sesame deep to deeply express el hazelzel, the same eyes that had once looked at him with much love. The same I had saw. Close, forever, desire, sir, all right? ALR wet? What? Hers jungentled, concerned. Xander realized he was staring grist himself, toblink, swallowing the tightness in his throat. Throat that the restaurant seemed unblowed suddenly, the laughter at clinking glasses, the music, but it was nothing compared to the chaos in Hi's mind. What? Had you your name? Me? Asks voice barely more than a whisper. Thing woman hesitated, early uncomfortable. Look, under his intense gaze of Evans tucked a strand of hair behind her, searing slightly on feet. Feet. Is everything okay, sir? Why, sir? Sophilinal in course, not, but the resemblance was haunting, PSE, and as if he were staring at Alexander struggled to regain Cregan composurious jaw as he stiffly istifly, yeah fine. Heckin Loskond Longer nodded politely, give you a moment to look over the Mont menu. FDLY, TLY, turning leave, Ave, but Alexander wasn't ready to let go, yet. Why wait, paused, and glancing. The words tumbled from his lips before he could stop them. Have you met before? Sopped Sophie, frowned, aching her head gently. No, sir, I don't think so. His harsening F, of course she hadn't. Lena had been gone for nearly 2 decades, yes, but it wasn't just the resemblance. See, it was the way soft stewed, bud, the qui gracious in hepisture, the kindness in hevoiced. See it too mucho too painful. Alexander pushed back his chair abruptly, the leg scraping against the marble floor as he stood. Odo, excuse me, his business partner blinked in confusion. Alexander, were you? Ryu? You, but he wasn't listening. He didn't even care about the stairs as he grabbed his coat and strode toward the exit. The need for air was suffocating. The storm outside had worsened. Rain pelted the streets as Alexander stepped onto the sidewalk, the chill soaking through his tailored suit almost instantly, but he barely noticed. He braced his hands on the cold stone railing, heart pounding inches as he struggled to steady his breathing. Get a grip. It wasn't her. It couldn't be her. Elena was gone, buried. The hem outside had worsened. Rain pelted the streets as Alexander stepped onto the sidewalk, the chill soaking through his tailored suit almost instantly, but he barely noticed. He braced his hands on the cold stone railing, heart pounding in his chest as he struggled to steady his breathing. Get a grip. It held. ITT held. It was gone. Buried. He had held the fortress he'd built around Hartford, and he wasn't sure if he feared it or if he needed IIT. E-rain tapped softly against the tall windows off Alexander Carter penthouse, rhythmic, relentless sound that mirrored the storm brewing. Inside him the city lights shimmered beyond the glass, blurred slightly as his gaze unfocused lost in a memory he had buried for years. His glass of bourbon sat untouched on the table before him the same way it had sat untouched at the restaurant earlier that night after her Elena 9 years eerily scent of lies had filled the air, FT music playing in the background. Na had worn a pale blue dress, her hair cascading in soft waves as they danced under the warm glow of the chandelier. "Miss me," she whispered that night, our voice barely above a breath'll never forget to live. Lexander had laughed then, holding her closer. "Could I forget when you're my whole life?" But promises had a way of breaking. Accident had been a sudden rainy night much like this unknown, co-collision moment of chaos and then the unbearable silence of the hospital row room. S delicate hand in his, the beeping match and slowing. "Ing," her voice fading with her fina words, "Ds let go. Oh, live for both ofist, esputut he hint. T." He had locked himself away. Wide. Instead. D. The memory cut deeper tonight because Sophie had Hephaestus, and Alexander needed to know why. The next morning Alexander sat in the back corner of the same restaurant, S face carefully co-composed, T in incidentian coiled like a spring. High moved gracefully across the row room, lancing a trayer focus on the guests she served. SH hadn't noticed him yet. T he noticed of everything. E-way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. St like Elena used Toto. And the way her lips pressed together in quiet concentration as she refilled a guest's glass ITT wasn't just resemblance. It was mannerisms and meant it was too much when Sophie finally turned and caught his gaze. Hesitated for a moment. Eyes met. Shifted uncomfortably, but offered a polite smile before disappearing into the kitchen. Xander exhaled sharply needed an answers. "Our Doc Cartro, can I help you?" The restaurant manager stood stiffly by his table a few moments later, early uneasy with the millionaire's unexpected return. Xander cut straight to the point. "Young waitress, Phi Ev Evans, ID to know more about hair." Manager BL blinked. "I asked there a problem, sir?" Xander shook his head. "Oh, just." Struggled to find words that didn't sound insane. Elisa said, "She resembles me own I used to know. Hatsalal." Manager hesitated but eventually nodded. "S been working here for about a year. A pollited working girl. Our Lalativer causes troubles to herself mostly. Now she's a student at Tadahink and think, and her younger brother. Bro furrowed. Younger brother mentioned her parents." Manager shook his head. Think so. Oh no, she was adopted when she was very young." Alexander's stomach twisted. A shiver crawled down his spine. "Oh, it couldn't be olded?" Then the door swung shut behind, the clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation fading slightly as Sophie leaned against wall, pressing a hand to her chest. Heart was racing. Had he come back? Why was he staring like that? It wasn't just curiosity, felt personal. Hai shook her head, hailing shakily had a long night ahead and the last thing she needed was distractions. Rent was due, she had textbooks to Buby, Dealey Liam or little brothers depending on hair. Whatever was going on with Alexander C.A. Carter wasn't her problem. That night Alexander sat in his study, dim glow of his desk lamp, the only source of light. Had gone over the facts a dozen times. Sophie 1818 adopted as an infant, Hazen biological relatives. RT pounded harder as he opened the old file on his desk, containing Elena's medical re-records. Na Carter died at age 22, with Nancy records and no Sering family.nd yet Sophie existed. There was only one way to find out the truth. Xander reached for his phone. "Connor, I need you to look into someone discreetly because deep down he knew this couldn't be coincidence." The city lights blurred as Alexander stared out of his office window, he weight of the private investigator report heavy in his hands. In streaked glass, same restless storm brewing inside him as he read through the neatly typed pages again. Phi Evans born on CH22 and 22ND, 05 adopted in May 2005. She had been born just 3 months after Elena's death. The timing wasn't just close, it was too close, and yet there was no mention of biological parents in the adoption file, no trace of where she'd come from before being placed with her adoptive family. Alexander closed his eyes, pressing his thumb and forefinger to his temples. Could it really be possible? Had Elena hidden something from him before her death, or worse, had she somehow survived? The questions haunted him. There was only one way to get answers. 3 nights later at the restaurant, the ambient music hummed softly in the background, but Alexander barely heard it. He sat alone at a corner table, his back straight, fingers clenched around it. He sat alone at a corner table, his back straight, fingers clenched around the stem of his wine glass. The air felt heavier tonight. His heart pounded as he watched Sophie moving between tables, laughing gently with the guests she served. For days he had wrestled with his own thoughts. Don't confront her here. Don't make a scene. But he needed to know, and he was running out of patience. Sophie approached his table, her smile now polite, wine glass. The air felt heavier tonight. His heart pounded as he watched Sophie moving between tables, laughing gently with the guests she served. For days he had wrestled with his own thoughts. Don't confront her here. Don't make a scene. But he needed to know, and he was running out of patience. Sophie approached his table, her smile now polite, but, "Can I get you something to start?" Alexander's gaze didn't leave her face for a moment. Words failed him as memories collided, the echo of Elena's laughter, the softness of her voice. "It's not her, don't lose control." Finally, he spoke, his voice quieter than he'd intended. "Sophie, can you sit for a moment?" She blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Sir, I'm working." "Please," something in his tone made her hesitate, glancing toward the manager, who nodded cautiously. She slid into the seat opposite him. Her eyes, so painfully familiar, studied him with quiet curiosity. Alexander cleared his throat, struggling to find the right words. "I know this is unusual," he began, his voice strained, "but I need to ask you something about your family." Sophie's brows furrowed. "My family?" He nodded, leaning forward slightly. His voice was low. "Were you adopted?" Her caught. What?" He said. "D. How do you?" "I had someone look into your background." His words tumbled out faster now, the weight of his questions pressing too hard to hold back. Her posture stiffened, her expression shifting from confusion to guarded. "Why would you do that?" "I don't even know you." Alexander hesitated, then CHS brutally honest. "Because you look exactly like someone I lost, someone I loved very deeply." Silence stretched between them, charged and heavy. Sophie allowed hard, clearly unsettled. "That doesn't explain why you're asking about my adoption. What are you trying to say?" Alexander clenched his fist beneath the table, struggling for control. "I'm saying I believe there might be a connection. Your birthday is only a few months after Elena died, and the resemblance." Sophie pushed back her chair abruptly, her face flushed with confusion and hurt. "Wait, are you suggesting that I'm related to your ex-wife? What are you even? I don't know." His voice broke, raw and vulnerable. "I'm just trying to find the truth." Sophie stood, voice trembling with quiet anger. "I don't know anything about my birth parents. I've never cared. My adoptive parents were all I needed." Alexander nodded slowly, guilt sinking deeper into his chest. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you, but I can't ignore this, Sophie. The resemblance, it's a coincidence. See. I lost Elena and then you show up looking exactly like her. Please just let me help you find answers." Her lips parted as if to speak, but then she shook her head, eyes glistening. "This is too much. I don't need your help. Mr. Carter, I'm not some puzzle you need to solve." And with that she turned and walked away, leaving Alexander alone with the ache in his chest. But as he watched her disappear into the kitchen, he knew one thing for certain: he wasn't giving up. The rain lashed against the windows of Alexander's penthouse, matching the storm. Raging within him, he stood in his dimly lit study. The glass of untouched bourbon was sweating on his desk, and a photograph lay before him. Elena smiling, radiant, taken just months before the accident. Beside it was the private investigator's file on Sophie. The resemblance was undeniable, but this wasn't just about how she looked. It was the way she spoke, the subtle tilt of her head, the kindness in her eyes. Was he losing his mind? For days he had wrestled with the impossible question. Was this grief warping his perception, or was there truly a connection he had yet to uncover it? All he had done was push her away, and it haunted him. Sophie sat cross-legged on the worn couch of her modest apartment, staring blankly at the cup of tea going cold in her hands. The echoes of her conversation with Alexander still rang in her ears. "I'm not some puzzle you need to solve." Why did it feel like he had ripped open a wound she hadn't known existed all her life? She had avoided questioning her adoption. Her parents were kind, loving people. They'd never treated her differently from their biological son, but Alexander's words, the sheer desperation in his voice lingered. ND, for the first time, questions she had buried began clawing their way to the surface. The next day, Alexander couldn't take the silence any longer. He needed to talk to her to explain. He needed answers. Sophie was wiping down a table when he entered the restaurant. The moment their eyes met, tension snapped tight between them. She straightened, clutching the rag like a shield. "Mr. Carter," she said, voice clipped, "I'm working." "I won't stay long," Alexander replied, voice softer than before. "Please, I need to speak with you." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You said everything already. I'm not interested in being part of your grief." Alexander flinched but nodded. "I know, but I owe you the truth. Please, just 5 minutes, then I'll leave against her better judgment." Sophie exhaled and gestured for him to follow her outside. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained heavy with clouds as they stood near the back alley. The scent of wet pavement lingered in the air. Alexander took a deep breath. His voice was rough but honest. Her name was Elena. Sophie's arms folded across her chest, but her gaze softened with curiosity. "My wife," he continued, "we met when we were just kids. She was everything to me, and she died 19 years ago in a car accident." Pain laced his voice. A car accident. Pain laced his voice, and Sophie felt her own defenses waver. I spent years speak, he added. "I don't think you're her." "I know how impossible that sounds, but you have her eyes, her smile, the same kindness she carried. I couldn't ignore it." Silence fell between them, and then Sophie shook her head, her voice cracking. "So you're saying what? That I'm some reincarnation? A ghost you can't let go of?" "No." Alexander's voice sharpened. "That's not what What is this?" Her voice rose, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm not some shadow of your past, Alexander. I'm my own person, and you don't get to make me feel like a replacement just because you can't move on." Her words struck deep, sharp, and painful. Alexander felt the breath leave his lungs. "I never said you were, but that's how you look at me," she choked, "like you're searching for her every time you see my face." She turned away, hugging her arms tightly around herself as if holding herself together. Whatever this is, it's not fair," she whispered. Alexander took a step closer, voice softer. "Sophie, I'm sorry, you're right. I've been searching, but not for Elena, for the truth." Her head snapped up. "The truth about what?" He hesitated. "I hired a private investigator," he admitted quietly. "You were born just months after she died, and there's no record of your biological parents." Sophie staggered back, eyes wide with shock. You investigated me?" "I didn't mean to violate your privacy. I needed to understand." Tears spilled over her lashes, her voice breaking. "I'm not your mystery to solve, Alexander. I'm not some piece of your broken heart to fix." He opened his mouth to apologize, to explain, but she shook her head. "Please just leave me alone." And with that, she turned and walked back into the restaurant, the door swinging shut with finality. Alexander remained frozen in place for the first time in years. He felt truly lost. The rain had stopped, but the city outside Alexander's penthouse remained draped in a gray haze. The damp air clung to the glass windows, blurring the skyline just as his thoughts blurred together, regret, guilt, and something deeper. He sat at his desk, the dim glow of his desk lamp illuminating a single yellowed envelope with Elena's handwriting. It had been tucked away in the back of his study drawer, sealed all these years. He hadn't been ready to face it until now. My love, if you're reading this, I hope you found peace, or maybe you're still searching. You always tried to fix things, protect me, and solve every problem, but some things, Alexander, some things can't be solved. You once told me you couldn't imagine life without me. I need you to prove yourself wrong. Please don't shut yourself away. Don't let grief become your prison. Promise me, no matter how hard it feels, you'll keep living. Let me go, Alex, with all my love, Elena. The words blurred as his vision clouded. I didn't keep that promise for 19 years. He had clung to the ghost of her, and now with Sophie he had let his unresolved grief twist into obsession, but I won't make this same mistake again. The next morning, Alexander sat in his office, the letter still folded carefully in his pocket, but his focus now was on a different document. His assistant entered, setting a folder before him. This is the tuition statement for Liam Evans, fully covered as requested, sir. Alexander nodded, his voice softer than usual. It stays anonymous. I don't want her to know it came from me. A week later, Alexander returned to the same restaurant, but this time he chose a quiet corner table near the back. Out of sight, he watched Sophie from a distance, not with longing but with quiet observation. She looked different, lighter somehow, as if a weight had lifted, even if just a little. She smiled more and spoke with more ease. ITT wasn't about him anymore, and that was exactly why he was there. Not to fix her, not to force answers, but simply to let go. Later that evening, Sophie clutched the letter from her brother's school in trembling hands, her heart pounding as she reread it for the third time. Tuition. Paid in full, but how tears welled in her eyes. She hadn't told anyone about the financial struggles. Only one person could have known. Her hands shook as she set down the paper, and without thinking she grabbed her coat and headed straight for him at the Alexanders' penthouse. The sharp knock on his door was unexpected. Alexander opened it, and there she stood, rain-damp eyes blazing, clutching the crumpled letter in her hand. Did you do this? Sophie's voice trembled, holding up the tuition notice. He met her gaze, silent for a beat before nodding yes. Her lips parted, confusion battling frustration. Why? Why would you? I wasn't trying to control you, Sophie. His voice was calm and steady but layered with emotion. I wanted to help her, arms crossed tightly over her chest, still guarded. You can't just throw money at people's problems. Alexander, that doesn't make everything right. I know, he exhaled softly, his voice breaking just slightly. I spent so long trying to fix things with money because you're then facing what I can't change. I couldn't save Elena. I can't rewrite the past. I can make sure you don't struggle the way I did. After losing her, silence stretched between them. Swallowed, her anger in her eyes dimming just slightly. That's not your responsibility, deaded. Note, I care about you, I care about your brother. This isn't about debt or gugwilt, about wanting you to have the life you deserve. Eth hitchachet offenses finally cracking gasent, trying to control Hiracent, trying to repla cracking gamily, just trying. She wiped her eyes, softening. Thank you, family. Ringed. Ender nodded, slow light tension in highs, easing for the first time in wee caring. Of trust had Ignis slowly's time. It wasn't built on grief. Real. Several wee weeks. A tersity sparkle ignited a canopy of stars. Kyline grief. Ing off the glass windolator elegant gala venue inside the soundstars. Piano music drifted through the air, mingling with the quiet hum of conversation as guests moved gracefully between candlelit tables adorned with white roses and gold accents. Alexander T.R. Truth had surfaced. Aina hadn't hidden a secret child from Chaim. Was not Elena's daughter. True Thursday faced Ted to her in an equally profound whim. Aina had a twin sister Taro had chosen surrogacy to help a close family friend co-conceive. Had cistern from that surrogacy struck when her birth mother conceived. Due to implications during surrogacying to her adoption as an infant. She wasn't Elduesh Wawaz, Wawert O'Kyle birth Sturt Alexander had never known. The evening Elanine was, we planned every dest meticulously chosen not for vanity, but for hair. Allah tonight was a fundraiser for young women pursuing a dedication as Alexander felt her. Why inspired to support after learning Sophie's story education of it all was Sophie herself when she arrived. Der felt his breath story she stood at the entrance wearing a soft emerald drawrift. Awed out the warmth in her hazel eyes. Her hairly pulled back in a simple ponytail, dead in soft waves over her shoulders. For a Mama Mahari watched, his heart-aching ponytail, ing deeper than grief, redemptioned him, moment I locked across Ross the room. A nervous smile touched he grief, redemption had mim, Andy right deadlocked across Didimed's gentle clink of glass lips, Ed as instant stepped onto the stage, decisioned, Andis dimitus, not tonight. He spoke not as a businessman, but as a man whose stage, ly found handy. Good evening, Ryan. Night is not just a celebration, a tribute. For years I believed was mevening, one, and accomplishments I celebration. Strength is found in though believed despite measured rest sheanplishmency and krong. Of courage that often go unknown hardships here tonight who has shown me exactly what true strength lunadist. Woihoite facing challenges most of us could never imagine, co-compassion, hohopadalik, want tor hair. Raud murmured so softly, Xander's gazimagine, compassion, it pressed a hand to her checklist, ly emotional. Sophie Evans he co-continuates steady have taught me that strength isn't about pop hour. About progress at finding light, even in the darkest moments tonight. This event is dedicated not just to you, but to the spirit of every young woman striving for a better future. Thank you for showing me what it means to live again. Law's erupted Alexander wasn't watching the crowd, watching her. The Haddad had begun to down the music softer now as guests mingled in small crowd. They were ups. Lexan they so soder and down thihi a paprochidized shimmering with unshed tea groups. Alexandro. UD so approached. Ice lingered live tears, I full. Now. Spoken Behai lingered Esperedno about the tuition and he whispered and everything you've done for me. ND Liam Alexander Tensum. And for her rejection radiance rejection. Add. Ched for his hand. I was wrong before, admitted softly. I thought you were trying to control my life. Oh, I see you weren't trying to. Fix me. We're just showing up. He exhaled, relief washing over him. I never wanted to replace anyone. I just carried I didn't know how to show it without getting it wrong. I smiled through her tears. You didn't get it wrong. This time and then slowly she stepped closer, edging down the final wall. Later that night the city sparkled beneath them as they stood on the rooftop terrace, he soft breeze tangling strands of her hair. Alexander gazed at her, his hand intertwined with hers. I never thought I'd feel this way again, he admitted quietly. She rested her head gently against his shoulder. Either did I, and in that moment it wasn't about Elena. It wasn't about grief, it was about them moving forward together. And so Alexander and Sophie's story reminds us that healing is possible, that love can bloom even after the deepest heartbreak, and that sometimes the most unexpected connections are the ones that change us forever. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with someone who needs a little hope today. And for more inspiring stories of love, redemption, and emotional healing, make sure to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay inspired and keep believing in the power of love.